everybody who's been before, and nice to see some new faces as well. If you're new with us here today, welcome to today's Housing Hive session. As I say, great to see some familiar faces and some new as well. So hopefully you get something out of this sort of the following 45 minutes or so. We've had loads and loads of people registered for this one, which is good sign of people being interested in today's topic in particular. So hopefully this gives you something to take away today that you can make use of at your housing association. So today agenda will be obviously managing customer communications, as you've seen on the registration page and some of the comms we've been putting out. So we'll be going through very quick introductions on myself, on Prodo as an agency. We will have things popping up as time goes on in the chat pane, things, a couple of questions. So feel free to engage with those. But if you wouldn't mind keeping on mute just for the time being, just in case of background noise and feedback and things, that'd be great. But when we do approach the question side of things, again, feel free to put your camera on, put your mic on, and we'll have a bit of a chat as well. And yeah, we'll go through Q&A at the end. So we've got a few Prodo people on the call today. So we'll all be here to hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any. But just to get started, very quick intro to me. My name is Jacob. I'm digital strategist at Prodo. So worked here for around 4 years or so. My job is basically to explore digital-based projects with housing associations who are looking to drive digital channel shift, really, and helping sort of scope those projects and put some things in place from a Prodo product and service perspective that can help sort of accelerate that process. Us as an agency, we are digital transformation specialists. We've been specialising in the housing sector for over 16 years, worked with hundreds of associations across the UK. We are the author of Shift. So hopefully some of you have either had one of those in the post or picked one up at an event that we've been to. So that's the book that we wrote in 2019, basically on how to make channel shift happen in the housing space. And there's loads of key contributors, some practical steps in terms of the things you can go through to help achieve that. And we're currently positioning round 2 of that book. So Shift Happened, What Next? I think we're going to call that one. So yeah, if you're up for contributing to that, that would be great. Obviously, we're the host of the Housing Hive as well. You're here today. And we're also the minds behind Franklin, which is the UK's first SaaS-based customer portal. Franklin's also our sort of umbrella brand name for our customer portal development project specifically as well. We run all sorts of different events across the calendar year and create all of these numerous videos. We always like to record them so people can get access to them afterwards. If you sort of missed something, if you want to go and watch something again, but there's all sorts of different things on there. So feel free to head over to our video hub and have a little catch up and watch some of the things within those different types of videos from a housing perspective. We've got web wrapped, we've got the hub for HubSpot, all sorts of different things in there. So feel free to have a little look on there. But enough for the intro stuff, I suppose. So on to today's topic, which is managing customer communications. And yeah, with so many of you guys signed up today and some good attendance so far, it's clear that there's a lot of interest in this particular area, which is great. So omnichannel presence. So modern day consumers, customers have access to all sorts of different channels. The pandemic's seen a wave of almost digital laggards almost. So those have been forced to switch to digital channels due to that reduced in-person operations, if you like. And those who want their online experience to feel as easy and as normal as it was over the phone or face-to-face, which we know is an ambition of housing associations, making sure that customer service remains in check. Now, omnichannel is the idea of using all of the channels to create one unified experience for the customer, including traditional, offline, digital, face-to-face, and online experiences as well. And some research from the Drum, which assessed customer expectations before and during the first lockdown of 2020, which feels like only a few days ago, but it was over a year ago now, found that no one preferred channel for brand communication. There was no one preferred channel for brand communication, sorry. So almost half wanted to communicate via email, 35% via live chat, 17% via social media, and the list sort of goes on from there. So being present with your customers on more than one channel is really important. We know customers are often really picky, and if you're not providing a good experience, then they'll simply drop that in search of a different sort of experience that works for them. That's typically what we've seen in the sort of the housing space over the years. People are almost a little bit resistant to change and sort of adopt digital because historically they found telephone and sort of face-to-face things working well for them. Now, that same piece of research almost found almost a third of customers will not sort of engage with a business or an organization that provides poor customer service during lockdown again. So again, sort of building up that trust side of things and sort of breaking that is quite hard to build that back up again. So it's paramount that customer service and those different sort of omni-channel approaches sort of satisfies all of that, I suppose. For customer service specifically, consider chatbots and things to provide automated responses and messages for quite straightforward tasks like maybe balance inquiries, repairs statuses where those integrations are available, or other sort of appointments and things people usually tend to get in touch with you about. By doing this, you can gather things around essential communication, essential customer information, and ensure they have a complete view of internally from that customer engagement side of things. Then instantly that inquiry can be escalated to a human agent if necessary. They can provide the sort of focus and the humanized sort of approach in terms of the most accurate and valuable response. And we've seen some great success in the housing associations using chatbots over the last few years. But it's not just that, there's all sorts of things we've got on the screen there. So generally for engagement, it's about providing that timely and relevant communication to help sort of foster and build that trust we just spoke about. That could mean something like a personalized sort of email, an update on somebody's repair status, as I say, or appointment. And that could all be done with things like email outreach, these chatbots we speak of, and also things like SMS integrations and things as well. So the list of up and coming channels that associations should be looking to is really broad, and we're speaking to some associations who are adopting some of these already, some of them a little bit, some of you guys maybe a little bit earlier on in your sort of digital journey, but we're looking to utilize things like voice recognition, smart speakers like Alexa and things that enhance automation and sort of efficiencies, ease of access, and they're also great for things like accessibility as well, if certain sections of your sort of customer base are of that nature where they're not necessarily going to engage with digitally. Putting those sorts of things in place from a smart home perspective could be something to sort of something to work towards, I suppose. A bit of a first sort of port of call for a question at this stage. So in terms of if anyone would like to engage with this question, feel free to come off mute or pop us something in the chat pane. Are you all sort of confident around handling customer data, current sort of comms channels, anything in particular work on at the moment that may be sort of relevant for today's talk around sort of digital innovation side of things at all? Anyone wants to put anything in there? Feel free if not. Everyone being quiet, don't worry. Okay. So we'll move through the next sort of step, and hopefully that'll prompt a little bit of conversation maybe. So onto the next bit, which is 2 seconds. I've just lost. There it is. If you're seeing that, sorry about that. 2 seconds, guys. That's what happens when I use a second screen, which I'm not used to doing. Let me share again. 1 sec. Okay. There we go. You seen that page okay again, Meg? Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
okay.
right again.
So the next bit is the power and sort of precarious nature of data generally. So for a fair few years, I think it's quite safe to say that we've all become really sort of aware personally about our own data, as well as also from an organizational customer perspective, how we sort of manage customer data as well. So at the heart of it, data drives transformation, but we need to be really careful about how we collect it and how we use that as well. We recently went to, myself, Liv and Claire, who are on the call, recently went to the Connected Futures event in Manchester. I think that was last week. Jackie Bateson, the managing director from Hacked, who you may be already aware of, she chaired a panel around defining and delivering digital transformation, where handling data analysis was a key theme. The ethics around it, utilizing the wealth of information we have, is really important, as well as understanding the difference between data and insights to be gained from that data. So terms like data-driven decisions, you'll often hear used throughout the sort of digital space, and sort of generally, I suppose, a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment, but in reality, insight is really the sort of the goal that you're looking for from those different sort of data sets that you've collected. You'll likely have access, from our experience, this is the case for housing associations, access to endless sort of streams of customer data, but just a pile of different numbers in different systems which are not necessarily connected together doesn't really give you what you're looking for in terms of that valuable insight from the organization, where that analysis into that data and sort of aggregating things can. So turning research data into insights is the key really around a more strategic and well-informed decision-making process. This can prompt things like small but important changes that can really revolutionize your marketing outreach, but also your communication strategy to current customers as well. But again, making sure that the customer is actively part of this process is really essential for transparency. And again, that sort of trust building process, I guess, as well. Ultimately, it's there to, the data is there for you to harness to make informed and sort of steer decision making, but it can't replace that real time customer feedback and sort of connection side of things. So the difference between data, information and insight, I think, is quite important here. So just to begin with, the data itself is that raw and unprocessed facts that we capture according to some agreed upon standards. So it could be a whole bunch of numbers, it could be imagery, audio clips, call transcripts, or something similar to that. Information as part of that data is processed, aggregated and organized to give you a bit of a more human-friendly format. Data visualizations and reports and dashboards are really common ways to sort of be able to consume that in a bit easier way. And then insight is gained by analyzing the data and communication together in order to understand what the context is of that particular situation and draw conclusions from it. Again, going back to that data-driven decision-making. So that can lead to organizational change in some scenarios and quite often. But around sort of using this to inform and innovate, there's the old saying, isn't there, around feedback being the breakfast of champions. And something we found that came up a lot, again, at the Connected Futures Summit last week, was that your customers hold the key to forming a strong foundation for genuinely useful solutions. Another talk as part of that event was Simon Penny, who's customer researcher at Citizen Housing. He led a talk around service design and highlighted how vital it is to involve, engage and connect with tenants. Is a theme across the whole sort of event, to be honest. And this is something we certainly agree with. Starting with the problems your customers are facing, engaging with the end user from the beginning helps you understand how those digital solutions and services fit into their actual lives to offer more relevancy to your particular customer base, rather than just basing that upon internal sort of thoughts, preferences, or what other associations or other sort of sectors might be doing. Suzanne, who we work with at PA Housing, she's head of projects. She sort of echoed this sentiment in a separate panel, which was about how important it is to focus on becoming more human-centric, rather than simply just following what people think that they want or what we think we want from an internal perspective. And more often than not, there's been a tendency to design services around gut feelings or instincts, myths, industry trends, rather than those insights and sort of data information which we just talked about. And sometimes it can be quite easy to get stuck in a bit of a rut of doing the same thing over and over, because that's how things have always been done, when sometimes it's a case of needing that sort of fresh pair of eyes to question why things are being done and how they're being done, and then go about sort of forming a better solution, I suppose. Personalization, the more you know about your customers, the more you can deliver that tailored experience, which is a big part of sort of customer expectation today, not just in the housing space, but elsewhere as well. That's going to improve engagement generally. You may already know we do a lot of work with one of our tech partners, which is HubSpot, who really sort of champion that ideology of delivering the right content at the right time to make sure that you're offering specific and tailored content to that particular person's current situation, whether it be buying a product or whether it be a particular sort of query or status or part of the life cycle stage with your housing association as well, rather than that one size fits all, because we know there's all sorts of different things to think about there from a variables perspective. So for example, if a housing association, you guys have 100 tenants across 4 locations, communication can be tailored based upon where they live, maybe flagging data at a sort of data processing level, making those comms more frequent, more planned should be the direction that you're sort of heading in. At the moment, some only see this as an opportunity to speak to the tenants when a problem arises, but or when sort of money or sort of rent queries are involved, but there's so much more that can be done here. So if you think about generally being proactive with comms and notifying residents of their balance regularly, giving them repairs updates, keeping them in the loop with communal issues maybe, or the ASB case that they've recently logged. These are all reasons why these people will look to reach out to you and sort of get in touch, maybe call you and wait in the call queue or come to visit the office, probably pre-COVID. But if you're giving them that information frequently, by doing so, they'll feel firstly more connected to you as a sort of a landlord supplier, if you like. It will make them feel listened to and valued as a customer, and ultimately it means that they don't need to get in touch with you for these things because you're already telling them. Ultimately, sort of contributing towards that overarching goal of digital channel shift, which is a huge part of the sector over the last few years and ongoing really. But we know that a big barrier to sort of achieving this for housing associations is the data is quite difficult to access. It's outdated. It's possibly poor quality and it's got big gaps in it, or it's sort of spread across disparate systems, which can make this sort of process quite difficult. But a term we use quite often when we're talking to customers about bad data is that term bad data, which is essentially inaccurate or inconsistent. So it can be due to a number of reasons. It can be missing data in particular areas. We often find that some associations we work with have asset management data missing, for instance. So they're not sure about certain appliances and certain pieces of tech and whatever else in the homes, like boilers. It can be poor sources of information. It can be human error in terms of manipulating that data in a database, simply old data, or even sort of duplicates. Now, poor data quality can dramatically impact marketing and comms efforts with stale or inaccurate lists or outreach lists where you're looking to target those people. It can really decrease deliverability rates and increase things like spam labeling. We'll go into a little bit more around how iOS 15 is impacting this shortly. But it can also ruin reputations as well. So an out of sector example would be that the case where Aviva accidentally sent an email greeting every single customer of theirs as Michael, which raised huge concerns about their data handling specifically. So you can imagine if, I'm not sure if any of you were sort of subject to this as an Aviva customer, but you can imagine if you're receiving comms from a supplier or your landlord, for instance, where the data within that comms isn't actually yours. It sort of makes you think, well, what's happened to my data? Is someone else seeing my data if I'm seeing someone else's? Which again sort of breaks down the all-important trust, specifically around privacy and sort of data, which is a huge thing at the moment. So when it comes down to data handling and what you're doing with that, it needs to be accurate as possible in order to make those informed decisions, as well as deliver those relevant, personalized messages to improve customer experience, I suppose. Now, we can't really talk about data without thinking about customer privacy specifically, and there's a few matters which are really important considerations for managing customer communications generally, and ensuring you're covered from a legal standpoint, and making sure that your residents are also protected as well. So it's more important than ever. From a privacy perspective, Google's announced plans to stop supporting third-party cookies in its Chrome browser this year. Firefox has begun to roll out enhanced tracking protection, and Apple have obviously just released the iOS 15 update, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. But these all have sort of impacts on customer privacy, which is, from an end user perspective, great, but can impact you guys from a communication strategy perspective. That potential loss of cookies is as a vital sort of tracking tool means that we'll need to in future start thinking about how we manage measurement processes. But I suppose now is the time to have deliberate conversations with your vendors, with organizational stakeholders about connections, about integrity and data privacy practices, and how to best sort of support that integration opportunities that are really available with technology today, I suppose. And while that sort of sounds like a very sort of heavy technology and IT discussion that some of you might not feel sort of comfortable getting involved with, it helps us all sort of understand how these things work, the way sort of content travels between systems, and what's ultimately required to meet these ever-evolving customer expectations, and how things change from a regulatory perspective as well. So obviously everyone's really aware of GDPR since that came into play a couple of years back, but it's now sort of more important than ever, and it can't really be avoided when it comes to a customer communication sort of managing data perspective. So for example, again, another out of sector example, airline Flybe paid a £70,000 fine because they emailed over 3 million people who had actually opted out to marketing communications. So you need to make sure that there's a lawful reason to process contact data. Now, often when they're existing customers, that's a little bit simpler, but for marketing outreach and things specifically, that really needs to sort of be thought about. Obviously, in light of Brexit, we'll be moving away as a country from GDPR in the coming years. What that will look like at the moment, we don't really know, but it could lead to like the end of cookie pop-ups and how those sorts of things work online. And the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, calling for rules being based on common sense rather than just sort of ticking a box. So interested to see how that will sort of change over the coming months and years. Now, we've mentioned this a few times already in terms of iOS 15. Now, this has been released and the impact can vary from industry to industry, from organization to organization, but there's no doubt that it will have impact across marketing and communication strategies as a result of the new privacy features within here. So if you're not aware already, there's things within iOS 15 being Apple's operating system, which often people will opt into quite quickly and sort of download, and usually there's quite high levels of opt-ins to these sorts of new privacy features from an end user perspective. There's things called mail privacy protection. So Apple Mail will now allow users to opt to introduce mail privacy features, which mask their IP addresses and block third parties from tracking email opens or other sort of IP data. So that you can imagine how that sort of impacts the measurement and performance of email outreach campaigns. Often we're measuring email opens and then click-through rates and things. So that open side of things will have a lot less weighting. Now, this is free to Apple users. For an additional subscription cost, iCloud can now offer advanced privacy features as well. There's a private relay option which stops sites from tracking Safari users, much like a VPN service. So users using Safari will also be impacted when it comes to your analytics side of things. And then there's on Icloud Plus, there's Hide My Email. So this basically allows the user to provide fake email addresses and sort of like cloak their actual address. So emails sent from an organization to the fake address will still reach the same inbox, but the organization or the brand or the company who sent that will not be able to access that real address. So obviously these things give the end user much more control and sort of comfort around their own privacy, but it really does impact marketing outreach and performance and how you sort of measure certain campaign metrics, I suppose. So we can help you guys with this. If this is something you're already sort of concerned about, or this is something you're hearing first today, we're carrying out a number of audits with our current customers around specifically if somebody's using HubSpot as an email marketing tool, we can look in there and look into the email workflows, the lists and reporting and things. But we can also look into your Google Analytics as well and sort of have a look at impact from a traffic analytics perspective from that whole sort of Safari impact, and then give you some recommendations on how to sort of mitigate these impacts and how to manage that going forward. So I won't spend too much time on that aspect, but if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about that, we've got a blog on it, or feel free to sort of reach out and get in touch and we can help you navigate through that. Now, we couldn't obviously talk about customer communications without digital inclusion and accessibility, really. So obviously accessibility is no new thing, but it was another recurring theme across the Connected Future Summit event last week. Again, Jackie from Hacked highlighted the fact that actually 19% of adults have a disability, meaning this isn't really a minority segment of customer bases. It's and it needs to be sort of focused on in terms of inclusivities to deliver that sort of seamless customer experience, really. And with that idea, much of this could be done with different tactics to personalize the experience for different users, I suppose. So it was an interesting one for us to hear because it's something which we touched upon before and something we work on quite heavily with the housing sector around personalizing experience on the front end, together with basing information gathering and sort of building customer personas and things to streamline what that experience is for those different sort of types of users, I suppose, and that different audience space. So from our perspective, we always build digital solutions from a website and sort of portal side of things with accessibility in mind to make sure that the front end design and how things are sort of hanging together there meet the WCAG standards. But we also tend to do things like introduce some additional tools there to enable people to increase text size or toggle between a high contrast mode to make things easier to read. Now, other things to do or think about here would be things like video content. So it's becoming more and more popular. You'll see video popping up all sorts of places on social media and websites these days. It can be great for this sort of use case as well. So if someone has difficulty reading, utilizing video for key messaging might be an easier way for them to consume key messages from either listening to it or watching it. Another session, again, from the event last week, if some of you attended, was hosted by Ken Amasaya from Clarion Housing, and they pinpointed the importance of supporting, just get rid of that, of supporting digitally excluded groups to make sure people don't get left behind, with the likes of support groups, digital champions, which we often hear housing associations go down that route, and also, again, animated videos to sort of show how people can sort of interact with them and sort of bridge that gap, I suppose. Is there anything anyone's doing in particular they wanted to sort of talk about today around digital inclusion, or any of you guys from Prodo want to talk about what we're doing with some of our clients? If no one's got anything to say at this point, I'd be interested to sort of open that up, I suppose, and have a bit of a chat about it rather than me just talking at you for any longer.
Thanks, Jake. I was just going to add as well, we talked about audits in terms of assessing the impact of iOS 15. Actually, audits into accessibility for sites is something that we do quite regularly with our existing clients as well. So that's quite a quick and easy way to get a gauge on how well your current digital offering kind of meets the required standards for WCAG 2.1. And often what falls out of that process is some kind of quick fixes that we can apply to sites to kind of close that gap a little bit for you. Sometimes that's really simple things like looking at alt tags on images. Sometimes it's more code related things in terms of how the markup for the front end of the site operates. You know, can people successfully navigate the website using a keyboard rather than a mouse, etc. So there's lots of simple things that we can do to you know, support kind of closing that gap for your digital platforms.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jen. Yeah, it's something we've done many times for our current customer base, isn't it? So yeah, if anyone's interested in knowing a bit more about that or wants to speak to someone who's had one done, feel free to let us know. Anything anyone wants to touch upon in terms of digital inclusion? You guys do anything at SLH at all, Matt, that you wanted to raise? Usually pick on you because you're happy to speak in front of people.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're probably the same as everyone else. We've done a few things with some of our sheltered schemes recently, trying to get them online, trying to use Zoom. But it was a fun event, but it was pretty hard going, really, if I'm being honest with you. What we did find is that people are extremely keen to use digital communications, but that lack of knowledge is quite difficult. So we tried doing a session where everyone getting on Zoom, and we had a presentation and we had a prize draw, and they loved it. What was interesting is I turned up with loads of iPads and tablets and laptops, but they all had their own kit because living in over 55 sheltered accommodation, the family have all given them their secondhand iPad or iPhone or whatever. They just can't use it. And we had tenants who couldn't even answer a phone when it was ringing, and it was driving them mad. So there's definitely an appetite for it. It's making it as simplistic as possible and, you know, less daunting, I think is the tricky thing. And I know I put something in the chat about WhatsApp. When we had like a drop-in session, people, literally everybody's wanting to know how can they FaceTime or do a WhatsApp. That's all they wanted to know. Yeah. So while I've come with all these great ideas about Zoom and everything, it was almost kind of scrapped that after day one, and we just showed people how simple it was. So there's definitely something there we need to go away and reflect on and see how we can incorporate.
Yeah, that's interesting. Has anybody else sort of experienced that in terms of having to, I suppose, go back a step from a digital inclusion perspective to sort of coach the people on how to engage? Because I suppose it's all well and good putting these things out there, isn't it, and sort of encouraging people, but if they don't know how to do it, then simply not going to work. Anything from other clients we're working with, Jen, that you can think of sort of in line with that?
I'm just trying to think, actually. I know WhatsApp was mentioned, and actually I know a number of our clients are reporting really good uptake in terms of using WhatsApp as a kind of communication. And I think it goes back to that idea of simplicity, Matt, that you highlighted. You know, actually, as much as it's kind of just replicating that kind of one-to-one communication, but in a different channel, it is easy for customers to engage there, and perhaps easier for your teams to kind of manage the throughput of those queries. Perhaps they're queued up in a different way to how the phone lines are sort of queued up as well. But yeah, definitely hearing sort of good success stories in terms of how WhatsApp's been used, particularly since the pandemic hit last year. People pivoting around sort of using that as a kind of quick, easy mechanism to kind of be in touch with customers more directly.
It's quite widely sort of not advertised, but it's part of the whole WhatsApp thing is the whole end-to-end encryption side of things as well, which I think gives people some confidence to engage with that, I suppose, because I suppose that can be another potential barrier, isn't it, to these sorts of people sort of engaging digitally. Do I want to be talking to somebody about X, Y, and Z from a digital perspective? But yeah, super secure, which is encouraging, I suppose, from the end user perspective. Okay, we've got another slide around if anyone wanted to bring up particular sort of challenges that anyone's faced. I know we just touched upon one that Matt's having at South Liverpool Homes, but if anyone else wanted to drop anything in, feel free. But again, don't worry if not. We can move on to the next bit, which is just us sort of tying things up, I suppose. Don't worry if everyone's been a bit quiet today and don't want to speak. It's absolutely fine. But
I wanted to go back to a point about kind of data integrity and data accuracy, and actually something we've heard from a number of our clients when we look at self-service solutions and we look at ways to kind of get customers online, get them registered for portals and self-service features. Sometimes a big barrier is actually the data that you hold about customers in the first place. So not necessarily having email addresses, or where you do have email addresses and contact information, not having really good confidence around the validity of that information. So just wondered if anyone else has a similar experience, or if anyone's taken any measures or put anything in place to try and improve on that and mitigate that problem. Yeah,
interesting to know. Yeah, it's something that crops up, isn't it, when we talk about not sort of encouraging like portal signups and registrations, but trying to get people to use them as much as possible. And when we sort of approach that project each time, sometimes it's the case, as you say, Jen, isn't it, that the housing association are missing a whole bunch of email addresses, so it makes it a bit difficult.
Yeah.
You got one there, Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say. So I mean, we've actually started. Well, it's been going for about 18 months now, but an information management group program. So across the whole group, actually having a very focused and concerted effort to address data quality issues. It felt like for a long time, Peabody was doing lots of manual fixes, lots of the time, without necessarily root causing kind of where the data quality issues were coming from. So we've actually recognised that, we've got business as usual operational teams managing data quality issues, which is fine because they're very close to it, but they don't always know how to fix the problem at the root cause, and they're just doing a lot of kind of ad hoc pieces of work as opposed to one big piece. So we brought in data quality experts across. So we've always got like a representation across all the different areas. Customer services, which I work in, has 2. They are unbelievably skilled at actually finding out what the problem is. And when it comes then to, so we're currently going through, as explaining this to Jacob the other day, we're going through a big transition at the moment about developing our digital proposition for a customer and employee perspective. So that kind of front end and back end. And we've developed minimum mandatory data sets that allow us then to deliver that in a really kind of complete way, because otherwise, supporting that kind of transition of residents working in a digital way with us which wouldn't be effective. There'd be too many dropouts because things would stop, or they'd find faults, and we're already to a degree dealing with a fairly cynical group of residents when it comes to our digital offer, because our current offer isn't good enough. So we knew that we had to address a lot of those issues and fill gaps and make sure things are accurate and reflect kind of what's needed from a digital perspective moving forward. So it's a massive piece of work, and it's been pretty extensive for the last 12 months or so.
Yeah. How was that received internally, Andy, when these data quality sort of individuals were introduced? Were they put in post and then there was loads of work to do to sort of fix that, or was it kind of a case of like amending and changing the way of working ongoing to sort of do it?
Yeah, so definitely, as every area's almost got their own kind of key plan. So actually, so there's a prioritization piece to do. Part of our IMG program was making sure that you've got clear ownership of data at a senior level. So who are your data owners? embedding kind of data stewards in the process as well, and then having kind of expertise to actually identify and address issues. So it's been quite cultural, I suppose. And again, you are it's one of those things where you've got quite a lot of groups of people who are quite cynical internally around kind of, oh, we've always done this type thing and you'll never fix it type thing. So it's been quite a hard shift to actually kind of get kind of buy-in, I suppose, to say this is the time to fix it and get some quick wins away. We certainly want some of the stuff we focused on early to actually get a bit of momentum behind it. But it's a cultural thing. So actually just putting somebody in to kind of fix it, you can't do it alone. It's a multifaceted thing, and also you've got to then make sure that you can sustain any change or improvement you actually put in place as well, which means you've got to have a lot of reporting that come out of it and then hold the data owners to account. So it's quite an extensive piece.
I can imagine, yeah. I can imagine there's all sorts of different systems and things to consider there as well. We went through a similar process, obviously on a bit of a smaller scale ourselves, when we sort of repositioned our CRM internally at Prodo, and that was very much around a bit of a fresh way of doing things and accountability in certain areas for data quality and things, because as you say, sort of historically people get used to doing things and there ends up being gaps, and that sort of impacts how that data is being used from an outreach perspective. And it's a ever-changing thing to sort of solve, I suppose. But thanks for that, Andy. If no one's got anything else, don't worry, we can move on. So the last section really is that if you did want to get in touch with us and tell us a little bit more about your challenges at the moment, feel free to jump on to this form which Meg's put together on the website. We will receive those, come back to you, maybe come to you with some ideas in terms of how you might be able to solve those things, and give you some sort of case studies on how things have been solved in the past with other housing associations. But like I say, this is the last Housing Hive of this year now, which is quite strange to say. So we won't be having a December one. We'll just be boxing it off today, jumping into the new year with some fresh ideas. We've got a whole bunch of guest speakers lined up from our client base and sort of outside as well. If anyone's interested in joining us on that, by the way, let us know. Always looking for guest speakers on this. But no, I wanted to thank you all for your time today. Thanks for jumping on and having a listen and engaging with us. Really appreciate it. And if we don't speak to some of you until the next time, again, sounds really strange to say, but have a nice Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you next year.
Thanks so much for your support, everyone. We've got some new faces today and lots of regular faces, so thank you so much for your support with this group, because we really love these opportunities to get everyone together and talk about things that hopefully can help make a bit of a difference. So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jem. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Meg.
Thank you, everybody.